Full spoiler warning for Chapter 5, so please be cautious, everyone. Let me get my main point front and center. MewMew, or Pink as she goes by in the Chapter 5 Dark World, has one of the closest direct parallels between Undertale and Deltarune counterpart we've seen yet. Outside of Sans, of course, Gaster, and his minions in the Shelter group chat, such as Clam Guy, the one goner in the concert scene with Pizza Pants, the hometown butcher of course, and however many other goner-related NPCs I've missed within the world of Deltarune. Even more importantly, she fills this role without having a direct connection to Gaster. Shadow crystals being lost to dreams makes a connection with Friend or Gaster as a supplier much less likely with a Lightner involved. Especially since we know Metaton already formed one in-universe. The exact connection Sans has is easily speculated upon, of course, but I'd consider it fair to call it direct, considering the presence of his Gaster blasters in Undertale. A deliberate parallel by Tricky Tony was even made between the connection the Soul has with Chris, the Soul being the Undertale Deltarune bridge, while Chris acts as the anchor within the world of Deltarune, and the connection Pink's body has with her spirit. Where, in a Spamtonian sense, the Darkner body is the connection between Undertale and Deltarune, while the soul, or the Lightner spirit, is the anchor the character has to the world of Deltarune. With Pink being the first Lightner secret boss, Garrison, the first Lightner or Darkner fusion to have a Shadow Crystal, and the first Lightner recruitable to Castletown, I cannot understate her importance. In my personal opinion, this is an indication of the first major cracks starting to form between whatever the true connection between Deltarune and Undertale is, and can only be a sign of more to come, with the first droplet of water seeping through those cracks in the sky being the very Shadow Crystal that Pink holds. The most important aspect of Pink, what causes her importance to be elevated so much to me, is, of course, the anime MewMew Kissy Cutie Seasons 1 and 2. I'd mentioned it in my previous video reflecting on my Read Chapter 5 theory, joking that Gaster was just reusing assets, but to go over it once again. When the review from Alphys for MewMew Kissy Cutie Season 2 was shown in the library at the beginning of Deltarune, Chapter 2 I believe, the joke was that the tastes of Alphys were different in each game, with Undertale Alphys preferring Season 1, while Deltarune Alphys preferred the darker in tone Season 2. While funny, it would then be a reasonable assumption to make that the shows from both games would either be very close or identical. Otherwise, if they were only sort of similar, the joke wouldn't make sense. It certainly wouldn't tell much about Alphys in that case. With Pink's body in both games being so closely tied directly to the in-universe show, and having such a direct influence on her character as a result, this makes her a closer parallel than the majority of non-Gaster influenced individuals. For the majority of the returning Deltarune and Undertale cast, they act more like different sides of the same coin, showing different attitudes and acting differently based on living their whole lives in the magicless world of Deltarune instead of the underground. The world is breaking. With scenes like the Susie Rainless scene in the Chapter 4 Weird route, it was easy to dispute this as just our connection to Deltarune getting disrupted, or our view shifting towards Noelle indoors for a moment, but I don't know how likely that is anymore. We can easily see this on the Weird route, with Noelle using our influence to glitch or boundary break either out of Deltarune's world entirely, or into the shelter or under the lake. The allusion is even stronger with the Sans bread scene directly referencing the breadcrumb glitch from Mother 1. Though if this is just a reference, or a similar act to our boundary breaking that has actual influence on the world of Deltarune, is yet to be seen. You might consider that to be a bit of a wild leap, but Deltarune characters messing with the in-universe game mechanics to achieve their goals is by no means non-existent. Just ask Flowery. It might have failed in the long run, but he sure did trigger an in-game battle at the night as directly stated to prevent it from fleeing. as there's no non-aggro Chapter 3 flea mechanic in Deltarune. Possibly in hopes of avoiding a cutscene kill as well, though we can't know for sure on that one. Every Clopin-related warp, as well as his festival teleporting, could always be attributed to Sans being Sans, but glitches being actual in-universe mechanics seems like it could be a reasonable explanation at this point. If you want some more evidence, though, look no further than Friend's one major appearance in the Chapter 5 Dark World. Credit to Molly Stars of Device Theory fame reposting this on the Andrew Cunningham Discord for making me aware of this, though I didn't want to bother anyone by asking for the source. Credit to the source as well. If anyone knows who that is, please let me know and I'll add them to the description. In any case, I'll read for you so that we're all on the same page. Speaking as someone who knows a lot about glitches in games, from a meta perspective, this is extremely weird, and I hope I can explain this well enough. What seems to be happening here is like an in-universe version of a game glitch. The damage done by Friend is pulling data from elsewhere in the game's memory, specifically the table used to determine an item's dark dollar value. This is obviously programmed intentionally, because this is something Toby has included in the game on purpose, but it's referencing something that tends to happen when something in the game isn't working correctly. Namely, this is what generally happens during a memory buffer overflow. There's a lot of technical stuff to this, but to make this as simple as possible, most 16-bit games, think SNES era which matches Deltarune's style, can only count to 256. If something exceeds 256, then it either underflows, setting the counter back to 0 and starting again, or the excess overflows into the next available counter. An overflow causes weird things to happen, as the game will sometimes continue to read or write code past the point it's supposed to stop doing that. This can have various unintended effects on the game, as the game starts pulling garbage data from other parts of its memory, like the coordinates of sprites on the screen, or tables of item data. So, what seems to be happening here is that either the damage number from Friend's attack is so astronomically high, or the attack itself so incompatible with the game's reality that it blows right past the data used to calculate damage. Instead, it causes the game to glitch and calculate damage from a completely different section of memory containing completely different data. Deltarune itself, the game program or app that exists on our console or PC, is working just fine. But whatever the hell is up with Friend is causing a memory buffer overflow in the game's reality. This, to me, is far too specific to write off as a joke or just a silly Friend reference. By this point, Toby Fox is well aware of the community's fascination with Friend, and to just have this one scene demonstrating this one mechanic, I can only take it as a deliberate hint as to the importance of mechanics like this. It could also be that this is used as a way to get players on the normal route, who've never played through Noel's tricks on the weird route or side B, aware of this type of mechanic early on before it shows up more in the future. While you might consider that a stretch with it being just one small scene, it is the one small scene of the community darling Friend. That would certainly be a way to put the possibility out there without making it too blatant, as any Friend-related content is sure to be shared far and wide within the Deltarune community. Though, on the topic of the weird route, the song lyrics Pink happens to sing as part of her boss battle theme make reference to the weird route. Now, while I'm trying my best here, I'm certainly unable to understand the dialogue in her boss music without translation tools. I'll try not to focus too heavily on specific lyrics, as I have a feeling the exact wording and its meaning will be debated on for quite a while, just like with the spam-to neophyte dialogue. In any case, I'll link the source for the translated lyrics I'm about to use in the description. The world's in darkness to the rhythm of a curse. The world's slaughter, this time beneath the water. To my sweet one, to the one I love, the shaky path. Beyond hell, black and white. Now here's my question for you, dear viewer. Why is all this here? No, really, why? We already got the Forbidden Path begins with ice magic as a tutorial from the sword route. So retreading ground here seems odd. The dialogue does also seem to reference Side B, but even in that case, it would only matter if you went on the weird route, didn't press proceed fast enough at the lake, got sent to the aborted weird route, where a Noelle is just a Noelle, and then made your way to Pink's boss fight without ever realizing that pressing proceed fast enough would lead to a new possibility. Even then, does any of Pink's Snowgrave-related dialogue really hint at just pressing proceed faster? Doesn't look like that to me, at least. You would still never see the Chapter 5 Dark World in that type of route, though, which does imply some sort of connection between the two. And what could that be? To my eyes, it appears to be a sign of the Dark World fraying and cracking at the seams, be it through Flowery's shenanigans, due to the game going on for 5 chapters in universe and wearing down, or due to something else. In any case, with the weird route aborted at the lake, the world snaps back to normal as far as we're aware, with few of the weird route differences we've come to expect. Now, here's a question. What happens in a chapter without a weird route? In Chapter 1, there's no Noelle in the Dark World, but there's still a slightly changed ending depending on if the enemies were recruited or not. Chapter 2 had the weird route, Chapter 3 had the sword route with hints at the weird route, Chapter 4 had the big Noelle scene at the Holiday Manor, but Chapter 5? Due to Noelle pushing the player to proceed, you can either go to Side B, or, well, a Noelle is just a Noelle after all. Outside of a few dialogue differences from aborting the weird route in this way, even on a normal route, there's no major way to have an impact on the ending of this chapter. Unless you count the broken scarf, I suppose. Or if the coveted balloon ending has major significance down the line somehow. Susie and Rouse won't even let you hurt or knock out Flowery, and the rest of the flowers cannot be permanently knocked out. The most that happens is being unable to visit them in the cafe. So, what if the friend overflow glitch is hinting at something here? What if the weird route, missing due to the influence of Side B, overflowed into the weak link in reality, Pink, within the chain that is Chapter 5's Dark World, with the out-of-place song lyrics and a shadow crystal being the natural result? I mentioned earlier that Pink is the first Lightner to show up with a shadow crystal, but once again, why? She achieved her dreams the moment she entered the Dark World. She got her real animated catgirl body. The party might have dashed those hopes after her fight, but on the one hand, she was told immediately afterwards that she could come along to Castletown, and on the other, she already had her shadow crystal before her fight, even if there wasn't dialogue indicating that she knew how to use it. On that note, why didn't she know how to use it? Gerson knew how to use it, even if he didn't want to use it. The Roaring Knight is definitely using it, or them, somehow, even if it's just as a bludgeoning device. And we can presume that Jevil and Spamton either knew how to use their crystals from the jump, or were told how to use them by their individual shelter group chat contacts. Why doesn't Pink know how, body or spirit? Rejecting its influence like Gerson is one thing, but do not even appear to know how. Presuming that, indeed, the Shadow Crystal, the Shard of Broken Dreams, indeed comes from the Lightner spirit portion of the fusion between the two, which I would say is a fair assumption. My suspicion is thus. The Shadow Crystal of Pink does not come from this instance of Pink, but from her Lightner spirit in the B-side of Chapter 5, where a dark fountain was never formed in Flower King, thus breaking her dream. At this point, I feel like it's safe to say that the weird route is a part of the prophecy in some way. I won't speculate on if it's meant to be the original prophecy, just one interpretation of it, or something else entirely. But considering the difference in treatment the B-side got by the game, the weird route appears to be more natural by comparison. As we learned from Chapter 4's prophecy panels, though, a section of the prophecy broken only reforms somewhere else. Where else would it overflow towards then, with no Dark World in Chapter 5's B-side to reform inside of, but the normal route in Chapter 5 instead? Deltarune's 3 separate save slots are already likely diegetic, considering their dialogue differences, so a connection between routes in some way doesn't seem impossible, especially with the weak link in reality that is the strong Undertale and Deltarune connection MewMew, or Pink, has, acting as a point of least resistance. The overflow from the cat that is friend showing us a small sample of this possibility. Now, it would be fair to wonder, in this context, why Pink still has her Shadow Crystal on copies of Deltarune that have not gotten the side B ending. I'm not entirely certain, but my best guess would be that, just as the weird route is likely part of the prophecy, the possibility of what the side B could break is already accounted for by the all-knowing prophecy. It seems a bit too early to completely break free of our choices not mattering, at least. Or side B is actually still entirely within the prophecy's control. Either or. No matter the case, or the exact process, we still got an entirely unique result within the world of Deltarune. A Shadow Crystal holder with freedom's motif in their song, truly achieving her desired freedom without it being transient. Though it's the patat motif now, isn't it? So she achieved her patat? Still. While that's the bulk of my theory, there are a few more things I'd like to comment on before we get to my final point. Pink is the first recruitable Lightner. This does mean, funnily enough, that she'd technically be a more senior member of the Blonde Gang than Noelle. In any case, she, as a secret boss, is recruitable by beating her in Chapter 5, while, conversely, the Chapter 5 bosses, the Flowers, are unrecruitable and give out items instead. With this flip of Deltarune's usual norms, it does make me wonder if that's a sign of things to come. Something like recruiting Lightners to save them during the Roaring. Presuming the Roaring does actually happen during the events of Deltarune, of course. There's no tricky Tony plot twist around the event's occurrence. Finally, I was curious about something. According to Alphys and Undertale, the main power of MewMew in the show MewMew Kissy Cutie is to mind control those she kisses. And also, guaranteed, she kisses Chris on the forehead after defeating her in battle. So, presuming that the contents of the anime in both Undertale and Deltarune are incredibly similar, which is, of course, a core tenet of the theory, that did make me wonder. Is everything that Chris, and by extension the player, sees throughout Chapter 5 on a save file where you beat her boss fight real? So, why did I call MewMew the Anti-Sans in the video's title? Simple. She represents what Sans does not. The same with Gaster and his followers. They all, through some Gaster-related nonsense, be it device theory-related or something else, are slightly outside and above the reality of the game. Pink, then, represents having achieved this status on her own, freedom through a natural fracturing of the prophecy's rules, a freedom ordained by the prophecy itself, if you will, even if not directly. With Pink being a direct parallel to the Chris-Soul dichotomy, then does this not represent the goal we have to achieve within Deltarune if we want to change the fixed possibility of one ending? Using the 3 save slots given to us, fracture the rules of the prophecy in order to cause an overflow for Chris and the soul as well, granting freedom and the true possibility to change fate.